Thank you for watching us on YouTube. But did you know that if you're on the go, you can get the full show as a podcast now? You can get our morning breakdown of the most important topics facing our country, news not being covered by the mainstream media, interviews with change-making progressives, and info on what you can actually do about all this. Search for The Damage Report on your favorite podcast app and subscribe so you know when new episodes are ready to go. We have talked about a lot of primaries on this show, and in many cases, on the Dem side, there's been some interference, either from lobbying groups or from state and national Democratic parties. But in this particular case, when it comes to New York State Senate District 42, the interference is perhaps the most unique style that I've seen. And we're thankfully joined right now by Pramilla Malick, a candidate in that race, to talk about it. Welcome to the show, Pramilla.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm glad to have you here. So I want to jump right into what's going on with your primary, which is coming up in just about 2 weeks, slightly less than 2 weeks, correct?
September 13th happens to be my birthday.
Happens to be your birthday. Well, hopefully it'll be a good day for multiple reasons for you. So in your district, you're about to have the first ever semi-open primary. What does that mean?
Well, it's because of something our campaign had done. We petitioned to open up a ballot line of the Reform Party. Now, the Reform Party is generally a conservative party, but it's been very vocal on the issue of corruption. And it is a party that's in the midst of a transformation, moving somewhat to the left. But, you know, we found that corruption is really a bipartisan issue that pulls everybody together. And that's kind of what I've been doing. My work has really been focused on fighting corruption for many, many years. So we petitioned to be on that ballot line. We did not get that ballot line through the normal petition process because of an arcane New York state law called the Wilson-Pakula law, in which the party did not allow us to be on the line despite the petition. So we used another process, which is a write-in process. It's called the, opportunity to ballot. And we petitioned through that process, which is now going to enable unaffiliated voters for the first time ever to participate in a primary, in a Democratic primary on the reform line. And they will be able to write my name in on that line and be part of determining who will be the candidate going into the general. So it's a really exciting process to bring in tens of thousands of new voters into the primary process. You know, we've been confronted by numerous games played by the Democratic establishment to thwart our campaign. So we've been looking for creative ways to circumvent them. And we're also looking for ways, again, to bring more voters into the process so that our elections are real elections and not selection processes. And so I'm really excited about it. And I'm hoping unaffiliated voters will take this opportunity. It is a first-time opportunity, and it may end up being a textbook case as to what a true progressive needs to do in order to circumvent the games of the Democratic establishment.
And that might be the tagline for this entire primary season, actually. I want to focus on one thing that you talked about there. So you talked about fighting corruption in your past. You've been an environmental activist and worked in multiple areas. But I like to make very clear the stakes in these sorts of races. For people living in New York who don't necessarily pay much attention day to day to the state government, when you talk about fighting corruption inside of New York, what forms does that corruption come in?
It comes in many forms. I mean, New York State is one of the worst states in the country in terms of corruption. Albany is a cesspool of corruption. I've been involved in fighting a power plant project, and really because of that, by extension, really battling the issue of climate change, which of course has global impacts. And it turns out that this power plant was really approved through a pay-to-play corruption scheme that went to the highest levels of our government in Albany. The governor's closest aide was taking bribery money from the company executive. He has recently been convicted. His name is Joseph Percoco. Again, it's one of the largest corruption scandals in New York State's history. And I was very much involved in filing those initial criminal complaints that led to those indictments and then subsequent conviction. But what it really tells us is that corruption is really at the heart of our climate crises, and corruption is really at the heart of all of our public policy crises of the day, all of our major policy crises of the day. It is the way big money controls our politicians, dictates public policy. They all operate out of the same playbook. And sadly, because I was drafted by circumstance, it is a playbook that I have had to learn how to overcome, how to confront, and how to expose. And so I've become an expert at that, fighting corruption.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned your protest against the power plant, for which you actually spent several nights in jail because of your activism there. We only have another minute, but I do want your reaction to, as someone who's very concerned about the environment, in particular issues of fracking, what you've seen in terms of environmental policy being pushed both by New York and out of DC. They're targeting endangered species. They pull out of the Paris Climate Accords. What do you think as an environmental activist about what's been going on?
So I'll say two things, that our state and national climate policies are really our energy policies. And a lot of the environmental groups have you focus on climate policy, and they don't really focus on energy policy. And that's really where our true climate policy lies, is in our energy policy. As a nation, we are becoming entirely dependent on frack gas, and we see a coordinated effort by both state governments, as well as our national government through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, through the EPA, to advance that agenda. And I would say that true climate truth and climate solutions lies in between the crack between climate deception and climate denial. So on the right, you have climate denial. On the left, you have climate deception, giving us false choices, false direction as to what we need to do in order to overcome the climate crisis. To overcome, for example, gas has been peddled as a bridge fuel by people on the left, by Democrats. It's not a bridge fuel. It's the worst possible source of energy we can have to battle climate change. It's the absolute wrong direction. Methane has much greater of a global warming impact than any other greenhouse gas than CO2. So we're going in the wrong direction. And that's why I'm running, because we are headed down a highway at 100 miles per hour. We're headed right off a cliff. And unless we, the people, grassroots activists, take control over the steering wheel, our children will not have a future. So this is a campaign for people, science, for democracy, but it's really a campaign for life itself.
Wow, that's a strong way to end. Well, Pramilla Malick, candidate, New York State Senate, District 42, your election is coming up September 13th. Thank you for joining the Damage Report.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much for watching this clip from the Damage Report. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and ring the bell on YouTube to get notified of our new videos. And catch the Damage Report every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific on TYT Network on YouTube TV.